So warm and welcoming and thoughtful of you. Thank you. It's good to be with you guys tonight, and this is fun to take a minute and share with you some of what I've been working on. The first piece that I thought I'd read tonight has to do with teaching, and 12 years is that what I said on the bio? Maybe 12 or 15 or whatever the number is, but it's been a few years and it's been fantastic time. But as we all know, there are some real struggles in kind of the educational system and whether it's higher ed or primary schools even and high schools, and we're struggling as a society to really figure this out. And so this is one of the things that I think a little bit about, and I've started writing about it. And so this is a piece that I'm currently working on in draft form that I thought I'd throw out here tonight, and well, let's just start in and see what happens. This is called, right now, the title for now is called The First Day of Something. I walk into a ground floor classroom of the USU English building. It's the first day of school, and although I've been teaching this course for over a decade, today I have no idea what's going to happen. Banks of windows fill the room with enough natural light that even without the overhead fluorescents on, I can clearly see the faces of the students waiting for me. On the front row is, of course, a returned Mormon missionary. Near him is a has-to-be freshman with precise makeup, smiling at a guy with Kenny G hair. There's a wrestler and a tats-up-his-neck dude and a knee bouncer and a farm boy. They sit, waiting. They're so patient, this bunch, waiting like trout wait for a river to deliver stoneflies. What they don't know is that since I last taught this course, I've had a conversion. I'm not talking about a religious thing, really. I just don't know what else I'd call the change that's come over me. I can see now that it's been coming on for some time, years probably, except that I hadn't really known it until it swirled in during a weekend road trip to Arizona with my wife. I'd be hard-pressed to pinpoint the exact moment of conversion, but I suddenly found myself confessing to Cal how I knew deep down that most of the teaching I'd done for the last decade had, in fact, not been helping students learn. Not really, not the way that when you genuinely learn a thing, you internalize it, own it, learn it so well that you remember it for years, so deeply that it changes you. Sure, I had been delivering great lectures, leading great class discussions, designing great assignments, great this, great that, great stuff, but there were times, too many times, that I'd scan out over a class of glassy-eyed and lethargic students and feel like just another cog in an educational machine that was failing the rising generation. My students look back at me from their seats, trying to anticipate what kind of teacher they've gotten, thinking that in a moment I'm going to introduce myself as Professor so-and-so, hand out a syllabus, start outlining the course I've designed for them. What they don't know is that I'm about to do nothing of the sort. I've walked into the room without a single page of a syllabus written, without a single lecture ready to go, without a schedule or a list of assignments or a specific plan of any kind. I cringe to think what some of my colleagues might say about this, how they might think me unprepared or irresponsible. I'd seen the kind of prep that many of them do, the exacting detail they pour into a ream-sized syllabus, the kind of prep I've done for years myself. A day-to-day schedule of lecture topics and reading assignments and papers and exams, an exhaustive list of class expectations and learning outcomes and disclaimers, flanked by page-long assignment descriptions and even longer grading rubrics, the kinds of heaping content from syllabi of semesters past, filling files and folders on my hard drive. But today, I brought none of that with me. All I have today is an idea, a big idea, a single, solitary idea. I pull off my shoulder bag and flip the light switch. We all blink in the sudden light. The placidness of the room begins to ripple as a few students unzip their backpacks, reach in and pull out notebooks and pencils. In walks a young woman I saw earlier outside dismounting a yellow bicycle, who now takes a seat on the edge of the room, a little sheepish. a look of apology on her face. I look at them, contemplating how things will play out. I wonder if this will go Dead Poet Society, or Mr. Holland's Opus, or School of Rock. There's no telling, not yet, what this particular set of people coming together in this place at this time will become. And that's exactly what's so perfect in this moment before anyone speaks. The possibilities. Also, will Has to Be Freshman Girl start dating Kenny G. Hair Guy? I wonder. Soon I will invite them to consider my one big idea. But first I will ask them to think back on a time when they learned a thing. Anything. Maybe some will remember the first time they pulled an ollie on a skateboard, or discovered symbolism in a Hemingway story, or topped the scoreboard of kills in Halo 4, or solved a differential equation. We'll talk about what that felt like. We'll explore the situation, the process, the way the learning unfolded. And if I'm lucky, some student will recognize the relevance of the conversation and point out how unlike learning it is to be asked to copy notes from a PowerPoint, memorize them, and spill them back out on a final exam, or how they don't really remember much of what is covered in lectures, or how dehumanizing it is to be expected to unflinchingly carry out orders in the form of syllabus itemized assignments, or how class offers little thrill of discovery, little room for learning from their mistakes, little hands-on doing, how they feel like mindless drones in a soulless maze of someone else's system packaged in an intimidating apparatus of GPAs and graduation requirements.
Amen.
Maybe that student will overstate it a bit, but I know there's a certain truth behind the exaggeration. It's then, when I hear them cop to the level of discontentment they've endured for years, that's when they'll be ready. That's when I know they're ready for my one big idea. But I know I must approach this carefully, not make any sudden movements. I'm not out for shock and awe. This is a business of nuance and care. I must cast the idea upstream and let it drift in on the current of an authentic conversation. I'm a little afraid that I'll slip into my old ways, into the didactic grooves of lecturing that are so familiar to me, but I must not jump in too quickly with my own opinions or my own conclusions, must not explain everything I know. This is not about me, it's about them, their experience. These students are people, I remind myself, real, live, human adults. And if I'm to influence them at all, it must be done gently, thoughtfully, sincerely, so that when the big idea floats by, it presents itself like a perfectly natural idea, so appealing that the only reasonable thing for them to do is snatch it up themselves. That's what I hope will happen. I set my bag on the counter. I welcome the students to class and suggest that we circle up the desk, get to know names. Let's start there, I say, with names. Then we'll talk. I look around at the circle of students, the returned missionary, the Has to Be Freshman and Kenny G. Hair Guy, the yellow bicycle girl, the wrestler and tats up his neck dude and knee bouncer and farm boy. I contemplate their lives, the unique allure of each human being. I wonder which one will be the first to see it, what they will do with it when they've got it. I take a deep breath and make plans to unspool the line of a conversation that is tied to my one big idea. But really, I have no idea what's going to happen, which of course is the whole point behind the big idea. So we still kind of play that out day by day and see what happens in the classroom, and it's just a lot of fun. See some of my students here, and that's great to see you, and it's fun to be here with you tonight. The next piece I thought I'd read is a piece that was published and chosen for this auspicious anthology, being What Makes a Man, which is, probably a little too much for me to handle. That they put my essay in this book. But it's kind of a great anthology. It's got, you'll recognize some of the names of other people who are in this book, People like Dinty Moore and David Shields are in here, but also some grad students, including, surprisingly, because I didn't know he would have known, but Daniel Nikosh is published in here too, and so that's fantastic. So we've got a whole range of folks published, and this was published by University of Nebraska at Lincoln, so it's kind of a fun book. I think they use it for part of their gender studies program there. This is titled, It's in the Man Code. It had been impossible to ignore the whumping from the back of the Suburban any longer. I took the next exit ramp, eased off I-80 and pulled onto the shoulder of an access road, the thumping slowing, gravel popping under the tires. I looked over at Kel. She winced a wince I knew from 9 years of marriage. "What do you think it is?" she asked. Article number 12 of the Man Code. Always say it's nothing. Probably nothing, I said out loud. Nothing that I can fix, I thought. On the rear wheel of the Suburban, 2 of the 6 lug nuts were entirely gone, even the lug bolt sheared clean off. A 3rd bolt was bent, the other lug nut spun easily in my fingers. The hot Nevada wind gusted in my face. I looked off across the sage toward the Ruby Mountains from where an hour earlier we had left after a 3-day family reunion, where last night I had changed a flat tire, where last night I had failed to tighten lug nuts. I slumped back to the driver's seat. In the rearview mirror, I saw the eyes of our 3 children, plus 2 sisters-in-law, one with a child of her own, 8 of us total. The heat of the summer sun had begun to seep in. I didn't explain what might have happened if the wheel had spun free at 75 miles an hour, how the axle would have dropped to the pavement, skidding, grinding, throwing sparks, the wheel rolling on by down the road, eventually wobbling, tipping into the median, how we might have flipped, been killed. Article number 104, never call a tow truck. The tow truck from Ed's place in Elko arrived within the hour, along with a Dodge Durango to haul the group. As the rig hoisted the Suburban onto the flatbed, I noticed the driver watching us. His face twisted up as though he were trying to fit things together in his head. I turned to see where he was looking. A procession of car seats, diaper bags, 3 women, 4 children from a Suburban with Utah plates. With everyone else settled into the Durango, I climbed into the cab of the tow truck with the driver. He wore a thin gray t-shirt and a ball cap with a bill and a tight curl and frayed. "Thanks for coming," I said, "rescuing us out of the desert." And though I really was grateful to be rescued, I wish it hadn't been needed. Sitting next to this man, his big truck, his understanding of the ways of machines, I felt thin, wispy, insubstantial. I was that guy in the movies. The Chevy Chase character, the one who heaps up blunder upon blunder. I mean, what kind of man forgets to tighten lug nuts? All part of the job, he said. We chatted about manly things, trucks and big tires and gas mileage. And then naturally he wanted to know about the women. "Quite a family you've got there," he said. "Yeah," I said. "So you, I could have finished the sentence for him, but I wanted to hear him say it. He hesitated, rubbed the stubble on his jaw, adjusted the ball cap. "Are you married to all those women?" "Here's the thing," I started. He continued, "Because if you are, that's cool by me." He said it in a way that sounded like he hoped I was a polygamist, that it would gain me some street cred if I were. Instead, I explained how we were carpooling home from the reunion, how Mormons hadn't done the polygamy thing for 100 years, how I was married to just one woman. "Well, okay, but 3 women." He got a glint in his eye. I had no idea how to respond. I'd never met a person, not Mormons, not anyone, who liked the idea of polygamy. What I didn't explain to him was that Kel and I led a contented life in a small farmhouse in a small town in a small mountain valley of the Rockies. I didn't explain how we knew we would spend our lives together raising a family. I didn't explain it because how do you explain how you meet a woman once but spend the next 2.5 years apart? No phone conversations even, writing weekly letters to each other, how 2 weeks after your eventual first date, during which you actually fall asleep, you sell your only belonging of value, a bicycle, and buy a ring and a plane ticket to California and propose on the beach. How do you explain all that to the driver of a tow truck who gets a glint in his eye? But you can't just sit in a man's truck and disrespect him, especially a man who has rescued your sorry little self from the Nevada desert. Article number 55, never disrespect a man in his truck. Instead, I looked around the cab a moment, laid a hand on the dash, thumped it once and said, "Nice rig you got here." Article number 4, thumping things is good. The driver delivered us to the Les Schwab in Elko, left the Suburban for the mechanics to raise up on the pneumatic lift and repair, left us to relax in a cool, tiled waiting room while they worked. But here's what that tow truck driver really did. He delivered me from a strange and desolate country where no man wants to be found stranded, the place that all men fear, their own incompetence. As much as I never want to go back, I can already feel the proverbial hot desert wind on my face. I know I'm going to get us stranded again, somehow, if not on a desert road, then some other way. I shudder to think of it. Lucky for me, when I look over, there's Kel, my one and lovely wife, sitting there, smiling, and she is not nearly as appalled by my incompetence as I am. Article number 1, marry a woman better than you. Just one, though. So my wife, Dawnette, and I have been married 22 years, coming up on 23. Well, 20, did we just celebrate 23? 22, coming up on 23. Yeah. And our first Valentine's together, which is kind of the on-anniversary, right, the 6 months.
It was the 23rd this year.
That's what I just said, right? Okay. Oh, did you see that? Public witness. All right. And our first Valentine's together, I was an undergrad studying literature and reading lots of poetry, and I thought, I'm going to write a Valentine's poem for my wife. That'll be fun. That'll be a good way to do Valentine's. Didn't want to do the whole candy thing or the flowers thing or all that. But I'll write a poem, I thought. And so I wrote a poem, and it was really pretty awful. It was cheesy and silly, but of course, when she read it, she thought of how in love we still were 6 months into a marriage, and she read it, and there were little tears in her eyes, and then a moment later she said, "I can't wait for my poem next year." And at that moment I realized what I had done. And I remembered how her mother collects the nutcrackers, and her father, who's an artist, makes her a custom nutcracker every year for Christmas, and has done for, at that point, it had been 30 years or 40 years or whatever. And so now I realized what I was in for, right? And so there has been a poem every year. Sometimes they are very quickly written the day before, because it's a very stressful thing, let me tell you, to have to write a love poem. I mean, of all the things you can write poetry about, a true, deeply felt love poem is one of the hardest things to have to do. And I'm no poet. And so to try to pull that off year after year is a tough thing. Especially where, if I hit a good one year, that only means next year's has to be better, right? So I try to keep expectations low as we go, because I know I've got a bunch of years left to make this work. But this year's poem, I thought I'd read to you. Lisa is going to be reading in a few minutes, and she's a fantastic poet, and I thought I'd kind of segue into her work just a little bit by sharing one of my very few poems that I've written with you. This one is called The Gods of Phoenix. There is no love that doesn't begin somewhere, sometime, somehow. It was winter in downtown Phoenix. On the second floor walkway of a plain apartment building, he stood above the courtyard pool. It was morning. The sun cut a shadow across the rusted and repainted rail. One of her cassette tapes slowly unwound, and the handheld player filling his ears with her voice. But there was no love. Affection, sure, endearment even, but not love, not yet. He knew how he checked the mailbox every day for her letters, for the handwritten evidence that she had laid her hand on those pages, how he carried her picture with him, along with the picture of the house where he grew up, and the picture of his family, and the picture of that time he played Nephi in the pageant. She was among what mattered to him, but there was no love for her, not yet. He thought about the day he would see her again, still 2 years from then, when he would look into her brown eyes, hold her hand, hold her. He thought he would like it because there was the hope of love, but not love, not yet. Then there was a moment. It was nothing her recorded voice said. It wasn't the sunshine, or the cool in the Arizona air, or the way his lanky frame leaned against the rail near the palm tree. Just before that moment, there was no love. And then in that moment, there was love. Without explanation, without reason, not because she had taught him cartwheels, not because she had baked him bread, or because he had willed it. It just was there. He felt it. He felt something shift inside, like all his organs suddenly settled into place, lined up in a way he had never known. He loved her, he knew. He helplessly said it out loud. I love her. It was an actual physical sensation that rippled through him the way waves ricochet off the walls of a pool, intersecting again and again, lapping and then neutralizing each other until the water turns to perfect stillness. He knew in that moment that the gods wanted him to love her, and he didn't mind. Thank you very much.